welcome to the first homework video for Chapter 3. I'm going to do problem 7 for you. Now they've already given us the optimization, or written out the optimization problem, so I just want to transfer that into Excel. So I basically got everything set up. I just need to add in all my variables and whatnot. So for my objective function, the parameters for my objective function are 3 and 5. I'm going to put in some placeholders for the choice variables, and then of course the objective function itself is just the sum product of these two. Okay, and then for my constraints, so I have my funds available, my risk, and my US oil, and those were 25, 50, 0.5 and 0.25. And then 1 and 0. They all had to be less than or equal to. Darn it. There we go. All right, 80,000 here, 700 and 1,000. Okay, and then of course I need to evaluate my constraints based on my choice variables. So I'll get that sum product function once again. Choice variables, parameters for that constraint, and then of course anchor this. Okay, copy that down. Oops. All right, I'm good to go. So there is that problem all set up in Excel. Now I just have to solve. So I'll go to Solver. All right, here's my objective function. I want to maximize that by changing these two cells. And here are my three constraints. They're all less than or equal to these three numbers. So I hit OK. That's checked. Simplex LP, solve. Okay, so I am going to buy, because U is the number of shares, so I'm going to buy 800 shares of US Oil, 1,200 shares of Huber Steel, and my return is going to be $8,400. All right, so that was part A. Which constraints? Oh darn it! You know what? Let me go back. So better get the answer and sensitivity reports. I'll get the limits report as well, although I don't think I'm going to need it. Okay, answer reports. So why am I going there? Which constraints are binding? The funds and the risk constraints are both binding. US Oil is not. Now I do want to show you, you can also determine which constraints are binding just by looking at these two numbers, right? Remember, the binding constraint is when they are strictly equal, right? So 80,000 equals 80,000, 700 equals 700. So whenever you find two constraints that are strictly equal to one another, those are binding. Notice this one is not binding because we could have gone up to, 1,000 shares of US Oil. I think that's what it is. Yeah, maximum 1,000 shares. We only bought 800. So that's another way to determine which constraints are binding and not binding. What is your interpretation of these constraints in terms of the problem? Well, it means that we have exhausted all of our available funds, right? We had $80,000 to invested. Well, we invested all $80,000, and we have reached our maximum risk tolerance for this particular these particular companies, right? So that's the interpretation. Of course, US Oil, that just means that we have not bought as many shares as we possibly could have. All right. What are the dual values for the constraints? Interpret each. Okay. Dual values. So these are in Excel. The dual values are the shadow price. So what the shadow price is telling me is that if I had an extra dollar, my objective function would increase by 0.093. If I had another, these are dollars of risk, my objective function would have increased, my return would have increased by 1.33. Because US Oil is not binding, its shadow price is 0. And then finally, would it be beneficial to increase the maximum amount invested in U.S. oil? Of course not. Why? Because it's not even binding, right? I didn't even purchase the maximum number of shares of U.S. oil. So it would not make any sense to increase that constraint. And in fact, you can see that here, right here. The allowable increase for U.S. oil is infinitely large, right? And notice that even if I increase U.S. oil to infinity, the shadow price is still going to be zero because it's a non-binding constraint. All right? So there you go. Quick and easy. Problem 7 in chapter 3.